Hi, my name's Paul Grogan, and in this video I'm going to be teaching you how to play Terminus. In Terminus, you and up to 4 players are trying to gain prestige by building the best subway line through the city. Over the course of 3 years, you will move your player markers around the action loop, performing actions to gain resources, place new developments in the city, gain upgrades, lay rails, and build stations. Lobbying the various city projects will gain you additional prestige at the end of the game, as will completing your own agendas. A big thank you to Inside Up Games for sponsoring this video, but I also rely on the financial support of my Patreon campaign to keep the channel going. So if you want to support me directly, you can do so by becoming one of my supporters at patreon.com/gaming rules. Place the main game board in the middle of the playing area. Use this side of the board for a 1 to 2 player game and this side for a 3 to 5 player game. Place the turn order card beside the top left of the main board and then slide it under until the number of visible columns matches the player count. We're setting up a 4-player game, so the card will be placed here. Place the year marker on the first space of the year track. And please note that this is not the actual year marker that comes with the game. This copy that I'm filming with was rushed to me early and missing the actual piece. Yours will be much nicer. Sort the development tiles by type. Take the blue commercial tiles, shuffle them, and place 4 of them at random above the main board like this. If playing with 4 or 5 players, place an extra tile chosen at random. Then do the same with the red industrial tiles and the green residential tiles. Return the unused development tiles to the box. They will not be needed. Note that for your first game, the rulebook recommends using specific tiles. Take the demand tokens and mix them up in your hand. Place 1 at random in the top right corner of each development tile. Return any remaining demand tokens to the box. Take the agenda cards and shuffle them together to create an agenda deck. Place it face down above the main board here. Take the project cards and shuffle them together. Place 3 project cards at random above the main board here. If playing with 4 or 5 players, place an extra card. Return the rest of the project cards to the box. And note that for your first game, the rulebook recommends using specific projects. Take the advanced upgrade tiles and separate them according to the number in the bottom right. Above the main board, place 1 tile of each type if playing a 1 to 2 player game, 2 of each if playing a 3 to 4 player game, and 3 of each if playing a 5 player game. Any unused tiles are returned to the box. Place all of the resources on the matching spaces in the depots on the main board. Note that in a 1 to 2 player game, there are fewer spaces. Return any leftover resources to the box. Place the coins nearby in a general supply. Each player takes a player board in their chosen colour. Place your bonus marker on the leftmost space of your bonus track. Take all of the octagonal pieces in your colour. The thicker one is your prime hub. The others are stations. Place your prime hub on the leftmost space of your station track, and place the stations on the other spaces. Place your capacity marker on the leftmost space of your capacity track. Place your 8 lobbyists in your supply here, and place your 32 rails next to your board in your reserve. Take the build upgrade tiles, separate them by type, and give 1 set to each player. Place these tiles face down on your board, B1 on the left and B2 on the right. Each player takes a player aid. It's double-sided and contains a summary of the different actions. Each player draws 2 cards from the agenda deck. Choose one of these cards to be your end-of-game private scoring objective, placing it face down beside your player board. After everyone has chosen their secret objective, players reveal their second card. The numbers in the top right of the card determine the turn order for the first year, with lowest going first. The player with the lowest numbered card places their player marker on the rightmost space of the turn order card. The player with the next lowest card goes here, and so on. Then each player places their cycle marker on the space below their player marker. The agendas used to determine turn order are then shuffled back into the agenda deck. In reverse turn order, each player takes their prime hub from their player board and places it on any empty plot within the city, which are the circles. The prime hub represents your starting position and where you will build your subway line out from. It's an important decision to make, and when you're just learning the game, it can be tricky to know where to start. So don't worry too much about it, but a top tip that I got from the designers is to place your prime hub on a plot adjacent to city blocks that contain as many colours as possible, and avoid the corners, at least when you're learning the game. With setup complete, you're now ready to play. Terminus is played over 3 years. At the beginning of a year, you will collect income consisting of a chosen bonus and a budget based on how many stations you have built. And during years 2 and 3, a reward based on your position in turn order. Then, in turn order, each player places their player marker to a space of their choice on the action loop and performs the associated action. This process repeats with players moving their markers clockwise around the loop to perform actions. Each time a marker moves from the build zone through the checkpoint, that player completes a cycle, and their cycle marker is moved down 1 space. Once a player has completed 3 cycles, the year is over for them, but the other players carry on playing. And once all players have passed, the year ends and you start the next year. And after 3 years, you perform final scoring using the scoring pad, with players earning prestige. The player with the most prestige wins. I'm going to be explaining the rules for the 3 to 5 player game in this video. For the 2-player rules and the solo game, watch this video, but then refer to the rulebook for the additional setup rules and gameplay changes. At the start of each year, players collect income. First, each player chooses which of the 5 bonuses to receive by placing their bonus marker in the corresponding section. There's no limitations on which bonus you can choose. It is allowed, for example, to choose the same bonus as you chose in the previous year. Then, in turn order, players collect the appropriate resources, taking them from the main board at no cost. Resources are always taken from the leftmost column first. Any resources you take must be stored on your player board, and note that you are limited to a maximum of 8 resources. Later in the game, because resources are limited and they're taken in player order, it is possible that there are not enough remaining on the board. In this case, you may select a different bonus or just take what you can. If the bonus you selected had any rails, take them from beside your player board and place them here. There's no limit to the number of rails that you can store on your player board. Next, each player gains money according to the rightmost visible icon on their station track. In year 1, because each player has only placed their prime hub, players collect 12 coins. But as you place more stations, your income increases. Here, for example, you would gain 15 coins. And finally, during the 2nd and 3rd year only, players gain rewards based on their position on the turn order card. So in our 4-player game, in years 2 and 3, the first player gains any 1 resource or 2 coins. The next player any 1 resource, and player 3 gains 1 coin. The 4th player gets nothing. After receiving income, players take turns in the order of the markers on the turn order card. On your turn, you must move your marker clockwise to any zone on the action loop. You must move, you cannot stay where you are, and you can only move clockwise. You do not have to visit every zone in the action loop. You may choose to skip as many zones as you want to. For example, Yellow's first move in the game could be to place their marker in the market zone, skipping over the first 3 zones. And it's also allowed to move to a zone where there are other players already present. Once you have placed your marker, you then carry out an available action from the zone that you are in. Each zone has a choice of 2 or 3 actions, and I'll cover them in detail later in the video. But the important thing is that you must be able to perform an action. After you have performed your action, it's the next player's turn. Each year is divided into 3 cycles. On the first cycle, when you move your player marker from the build zone, you move through the cycle checkpoint. This moves your cycle marker down 1 space, and you are now on your 2nd cycle. On your 3rd cycle, when you leave the build zone, remove your player marker from the loop and place it on the rightmost empty space of the turn order card. The first player to do this in a year will be first in turn order for the next year. Also, move your cycle marker above. This indicates that you have passed and you will take no more turns this year. It can also happen that you are in a position where you cannot take any more actions, or you just choose not to. In this case, you pass and place your markers on the turn order card as if you have reached the end of the loop. When you are done for the year, the other players keep playing, and once all players have completed 3 cycles, the year comes to an end. The develop zone has 3 possible actions. This action is build a development. To perform it, you must pay 1 permit indicated by this icon. To do that, you must have a permit on your player board, and you spend it by returning it to the main board. Whenever you return a resource to the main board, ensure that you place it in the rightmost empty space. You then take any one of the development tiles along with its demand token and place them on an empty block that is adjacent to one of your hubs or stations. The block where you place the tile must contain the colour of the tile. For example, this block can only have blue tiles placed on it. This block can have either blue or green, this one either blue or red, and this block can have any type of tile. Let's say we choose to place it here. Place one of your lobbyists from your player board onto the tile. You cannot place a tile on a block where there are rails, yours or anyone else's. so purple could only place a tile on one of these two blocks, but not here or here. Development tiles represent major construction projects. Once placed, they open up new actions for players that have a lobbyist on the tile. On your turn, when your player marker is placed in a zone with an icon matching the development, you may choose to perform the action shown on the development tile instead of the action on the action loop. For example, on your turn, you move your player marker to the supply zone, represented by this icon. Because you have a lobbyist on this development tile which has the same icon, you may perform the action on the tile instead of an action from the zone itself. All of these tiles are fully explained in the appendix. The claim a demand action is shared with the build zone, which means that the same action can be carried out whether you are in the develop zone or the build zone. To perform this action, you pay 1 power. Then you take 1 demand token from a development tile on the map that corresponds to a district where you have a stop, which is either a hub or a station. For example, Pink has a hub in Tarragon Hills. That means that they can take a Tarragon Hills demand token, either this one right here or this one over here. You do not need to have a stop adjacent to the development tile or a lobbyist on the development. You only need to have a stop in the district indicated on the demand token. Take the tile and place it on the leftmost empty demand space of your player board. The more of these you collect, the more prestige you will gain at the end of the game. It is allowed to take more than 1 demand token for a specific district. However, to do so, you need to have 2 or more stops in a district to be able to take a second token, and 3 or more stops to be able to take a third token. Once you have 5 demand tokens, you can no longer perform this action, but you will gain 25 prestige at the end of the game. The Assign Lobbyists action is shared with the lobby zone, and I'll explain that when I cover the lobby zone next. The lobby zone has 3 possible actions. The Claim an Agenda action costs 1 permit and allows you to draw a number of agenda cards from the deck based on the current year. In the first year, you draw 3 cards, in the second year, 2 cards, and in the third year, just 1 card. From the cards you draw, choose 1 to keep, placing it face up beside your player board. Return any unchosen cards to the bottom of the deck. Agendas are specifications for the subway suggested by stakeholders outside of the city government. They will score prestige for you at the end of the game. An explanation of how the agendas score is detailed in the appendix. You cannot have more than 3 agendas, including your secret one that you started the game with. And you cannot choose to discard one, so once you have 3, you can no longer perform the action to take a new one. Now that I've explained how to get an agenda, let's talk about this action, which is the Assign Lobbyists, and is shared with the previous zone, meaning that you can perform this action from either zone. It allows you to remove one of your lobbyists from either your player board, one of your agendas, or a development tile, and place it on either your player board, one of your agendas, or a development tile adjacent to one of your stops. There can be no more than 2 lobbyists on a development tile, and you also cannot have 2 of your own lobbyists on the same tile. Placing a lobbyist on an agenda allows you to score more prestige for it at the end of the game. You can even place one on your secret agenda, but you cannot have more than 1 lobbyist on each of your agendas. The final action to explain in the lobby zone is Lobby a Project. You pay 1 permit to place up to 4 lobbyists from your player board on any single project. The first time you place lobbyists on a project, you must place at least 2, covering the leftmost 2 spaces on either the top or the bottom row. It doesn't matter which. That row is then reserved for you. No other player can place lobbyists on that row. And each player can only have lobbyists on 1 row, either the top or the bottom. Because you can place up to 4 lobbyists with this action, you could choose to fill all of the spaces of a project at once. However, lobbyists placed on a project cannot be moved for the rest of the game. They are stuck there. Projects represent specifications for the subway imposed by the city and reward the players contributing to them with prestige at the end of the game, if they meet the criteria for the project. This one, for example, simply scores for the number of stops that you have built and is limited by the number of lobbyists that you have on the project. I'll explain this more during final scoring. All of the projects are fully explained in the appendix. The Improve zone has 2 possible actions that are both unique to this zone. The Purchase an Advanced Upgrade action allows you to buy 1 advanced upgrade of your choice from the 6 on offer. Your first advanced upgrade costs 2 coins. Take your chosen upgrade and place it here. The second costs 2 coins and 1 blueprint. You cannot have the same advanced upgrade twice. Upgrades give you special abilities or benefits and are all fully explained in the appendix. The other action in this zone is Purchase Blueprints. You may buy as many blueprints as you want, up to a limit of either however many you can afford or how many you can fit in your storage. You always buy from the cheapest column first. So here, if you bought 3 blueprints, the first would cost you 1 coin, and the second and third would cost you 2 coins each. If you don't have enough room in your storage, you may choose to discard any resources from it in order to make space for more. Return the discarded tokens back to the main game board. You do not get anything for them. The market zone also has 2 actions unique to it. The purchase power action allows you to buy power, and the purchase permits action allows you to buy permits. Both of these actions are very similar to the purchasing blueprints action from the previous zone. You can buy as many as you want, buying them from the leftmost column first, taking the resources and placing them on your player board. The supply zone has 3 possible actions, one of which is shared with the build zone. The increased capacity action allows you to pay construction tokens to move your capacity marker to the right. The cost to do this is 1 construction token per space. However, reaching certain spaces also costs power, as indicated by these icons. For example, moving from here to here will cost you 3 construction tokens and 1 power. Your capacity limits the number of stations that you may build. You can only build stations to the left of your capacity marker. When you move your capacity marker over the first build upgrade icon, flip either one of your build upgrades face up. You now have access to this ability. When you move your capacity marker over the second build upgrade icon, flip over your other upgrade tile. I'll explain the abilities on these tiles later in the video. The next action to explain is gain construction. This allows you to take all of the construction tokens from the leftmost column that has at least 1 token in it. Here, for example, you would gain these 3 tokens. But if the depot was like this, you would only gain this one. This action differs from the others in that there is no cost to taking these tokens. The final action to explain in the supply zone is purchase rails, which is shared with the build zone. You pay 2, 3 or 5 coins to buy 1, 3 or 6 rails. When you buy a rail, move it from your reserve to your player board. And you can repeat each of these as many times as you want. So for example, you could spend 8 coins to buy 9 rails. There are 3 possible actions in the build zone. The purchase rails action, which is shared with the supply zone, I've already covered. And the claim a demand action is shared with the develop zone, which I have also covered previously. The build action is new though, and it's the most complex action in the game. It allows you to pay 1 permit and 2 construction to place any number of rails. You place rails from your player board onto empty rail spaces connecting your terminus to a stop of another player, or an empty plot where you then build a station. At the start of the game, your prime hub is your terminus, but as you lay rails and build other stations, the farthest stop from your prime hub becomes your new terminus, and all other builds must be from there. Here, for example, if you have built to here and then to here, this is your terminus, and you can only continue building from there. If you build rails to another player's stop, that stop is your new terminus. Some routes only allow for a single line, but others allow for 2. A player cannot occupy both of these lines with their rails. You cannot leave empty rail spaces on your line, nor can you leave empty plots in the middle of your line without placing a station. This, however, is okay, as your track is going across an intersection. You also cannot lay rails so that it intersects with your own line. And it is not allowed to place rails on blocks already occupied by developments. If you make a connection to another player's stop, you gain 1 power, taking it from the board and adding it to your storage. The player who you connected to gains 1 coin. A reminder of this can be found on your player board. And that stop now counts as your terminus. Even though it's not your stop, all of your future rails must be built from there. If instead you lay rails to an empty plot, then you must build your own station. To do this, you must pay 1 blueprint as indicated here. Take the leftmost station from your player board and place it on the empty plot that you just built to. This station becomes your new terminus. Remember, your capacity marker limits how many stations you can build. So here, you could build only 1 more station before having to increase your capacity. Then, after laying rails and either connecting to another stop or building your own station, you may continue to build. You do not have to pay any additional resources for building rails. The 1 permit and 2 construction you already paid allows you to lay as many rails as you want. But you must pay 1 blueprint for each additional station that you choose to place as shown here. If you end up connecting to more than one station belonging to other players, you only gain the 1 power for the first other station you connect to. For example, you're performing the build action. You pay 1 permit and 2 construction, and first lay 2 rails to here, and then 1 blueprint to place a station here. You then continue to lay more rails, this time making a connection to another player's station. You gain 1 power and that player gains 1 coin. You then lay more rails to a different player's station, they gain 1 coin, but you do not gain another power. And finally, you lay more rails to another empty plot, spending 1 more blueprint to build one of your own stations. The build action from the build zone is not the only way in the game that you can build. Some development tiles also have actions on them that allow you to build too. The building rules are generally the same, but with slight differences based on the tile used. I mentioned earlier that when you increase your capacity enough, you get to activate your build upgrade tiles on your player board. Well, now it's time to explain what they do. But before I do, just a quick reminder, you can unlock these in either order. The B1 upgrade tile allows you to build a hub, which is essentially an improved station. To build a hub, you must be already doing a build action, during which you may also improve one of your existing stations to a hub by placing the next station on top of it. For example, you're performing the build action from the build zone. You pay 1 permit and 2 construction to begin the action, but before building any rails, you pay 1 blueprint to place a station on top of an existing station, creating a hub. You then lay a couple of rails to here, placing a new station for 1 more blueprint, and then immediately spend another blueprint to place another station on top of it, making that also a hub. And although you need to take a build action to convert a station into a hub, you don't actually need to lay any rails, but you must still pay the cost of taking the build action. Hubs may be required to fulfill projects or agendas and will earn you additional prestige at the end of the game. The B2 upgrade tile allows you to have a second terminus. When you unlock this upgrade, your prime hub immediately becomes a second terminus, allowing you to extend your subway line in a new direction from there. As soon as you do build out from there, your new station at the end of that line becomes your second terminus. You can essentially, with a single build action, extend from either or both ends of your subway line. Once all players have passed, everyone returns their cycle marker to the turn order card, placing it below their player marker. Then, if this was the 3rd year of the game, proceed to final scoring. Otherwise, move the year marker down 1 space and the next year begins. Once all players have passed in the 3rd year of the game, it's time to get out the scorepad and work out who won. First, for each of your stations that is adjacent to at least 1 development, you gain 1 prestige. This station, for example, is worth 1 prestige, but this one isn't worth anything. For each of your hubs that is adjacent to exactly 1 development, you gain 2 prestige. And for each of your hubs that is adjacent to 2 or more developments, you gain 3 prestige. Next, check the public projects. For each project that you have lobbyists on, check to see how well you met the condition of the project. The rightmost column containing one of your lobbyists indicates the maximum amount of prestige that you're eligible to earn. For example, Pink has 4 lobbyists on this project, but has only built 12 stops, so they gain 16 prestige. Red built 13 stops, but only has 2 lobbyists, so they gain 10 prestige. Then reveal your secret agenda, placing your lobbyist on the card if you had one on it. If you do not have a lobbyist on the agenda, you gain the prestige indicated in the top row if you meet its requirements. In this case, having at least 3 hubs in Old Cross and Upper Ward will gain you 4 prestige. If you have a lobbyist on the agenda, you gain the prestige indicated in the bottom row if you meet its requirements. Or if you don't meet the requirements of the bottom row, but you do meet the requirements of the top row, you gain that prestige instead. In this case, the lobbyist had no effect. So here, if you have 7 or more stops within Knightsbridge, Old Cross and Upper Ward, you would gain 9 prestige. But if you only had 5 or 6, you would still gain 4 prestige. You then gain prestige as indicated by the position of the rightmost marker on your demand track. Here, you gain 17 prestige. And finally, you gain 1 prestige for every 4 coins you have remaining. Here, you gain 1 prestige. Leftover resources or rails are worth nothing. And the player with the most prestige wins. In case of a tie, the tied player with the fewest remaining stations on their player board is the winner. And if still tied, the player with the most coins breaks the tie. In the unlikely event that players are still tied, they share the victory. I hope you found this video useful in learning how to play Terminus. If you have any questions about the game, please leave them in the comments, and whilst you're there, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as mentioned earlier, I do rely on the financial support of my Patreon campaign to keep the channel going. So if you want to support me directly and help me continue to make videos, you can do so at patreon.com/gaming rules for exclusive access to the Gaming Rules community and some additional bonus content. Until next time, take care and thanks for watching.